Okay. So it is 1:12. The killing of Pittman is at 1:12. You know, I had thought that it was a half an hour later, which would have given him more time to get it, because there's this whole period where after the actual shooting, and again, Bugliosi has got the times here. He's got, now I got, how much did I pay for this little book? Oh, $20, yeah. But this is, they've got the first shot right directly at 12:30 on the nose. In fact, because of the being able to see the clock above the Dealey Plaza, they've got at 12:29 and 45 seconds. The certain things specifically happening. Bonnie Ray Williams and Harold Norman and James Jarman and 3 sock boys seen by people in the street below have a perfect view of the president, etc. And then they got the first shot right at 12:30 p.m. Bang. And then the killing of Tippit is described this way. It says just after, well, Tatum, they explain who these other people are. William Scoggins, a 49-year-old cab driver, eats a sandwich in his taxi and ponders the shooting of the president. He's just dropping a fare from the airport, and after a brief stop at the Gentleman's Club, a domino parlor and lunch spot on Peyton Street, on the other side of the street from where Scoggins parks his car, about a half a block south in the direction of Jefferson Boulevard, to watch the coverage of the assassination on television. He returns to his parking spot at the corner of 10th and Patton. The area is a scruffy working-class residential neighborhood of aging frame homes, about 4 miles from Dealey Plaza. So here we are, we're 4 miles from Dealey Plaza, and it is 42 minutes after the first shot that killed the president. And he says that a woman stands on the corner diagonally across from Scoggins, waiting for traffic to clear so she can cross the street. A pair of work shoes in her hand. Helen Markham, 47, is on her way to catch the 1:15 p.m. bus at the next corner, the corner of Patton and Jefferson. The same one she takes every day to the Eat Well restaurant on Main Street downtown, where she works as a waitress. She sees this police car slowly cross the intersection and sort of ease up alongside a man. Scoggins watches at 11:11. Scoggins watches the police car stop around 120 feet down 10th Street to his right, and is then that he also notices a man in a light-colored jacket standing on the sidewalk. The man walks over toward the police car, passing out of Scoggins' sight behind some shrubs. Markham has an unobstructed view and sees the man go over to the squad car, lean over, and places his arms on the ledge of the open window, front window on the passenger side. She observes him talking to the officer through the open window and assumes that it looks like a friendly conversation. JJack Ray Tatum, a 25-year-old medical photographer from Baylor University Medical Center, turns into 10th Street from Denver and heads west in his red Ford Galaxy. Tatum's boss has given him an afternoon off, and he's been spending it running errands and buying a watch and ring for his wife on a layaway plane at Gordon's Jewelers. Approaching Patton Street, he sees a squad car driving east on 10th Street, and a young white male was also walking east, the same direction in which the squad car was going. When the squad car pulls over to the curb, he sees the man approach the squad car on the passenger side. As Tatum drives past, he can see the police officer in the front seat leaning over toward the man, whose hands are crammed into the pockets of his light gray zipper jacket. He gets the impression that they're talking. Tatum wonders why the cop has stopped him. Domino Benavides is in his pickup truck, a half a dozen car lengths behind Tatum. The mechanic from Duke Motors is pretty annoyed with himself. He was on his way to the auto parts store at Marseilles, intent to get a carburetor, and he was damn near there when it dawned on him that he'd forgotten the part number. He's heading back west on 10th Street when he sees the police car ahead on the left. Just as Tatum passes the squad car, Helen Markham watches the driver's door open, and the police officer climbs out. He doesn't seem to be in any hurry, and he's not drawing his weapon. The officer starts walking toward the front of the car, not keeping his eyes on the man, but looking down at the ground, his right hand, like a Western sheriff, on his gun butt, as the young man on the passenger side then puts his hands into his pockets and takes 2 steps back. Suddenly, the young man pulls a gun out from under his jacket. Bang, 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 bang. Bullets fly across the hood of the car. Scoggins looks up from his sandwich and sees the policeman grab his stomach, then fall. Benavides is almost abreast of the squad car when the shooting erupts. He jerks the wheel hard to the right and bumps his '57 Chevy pickup into the curb and throws himself down in the front seat. Okay, so that's at 1:12 p.m. Now, so that's 4 miles away. It's 42 minutes later, and these people later identify Oswald as the guy that they saw do the shooting. There are 4 people who identify him. And this guy here, the guy that drove up the Benavides, is one of the guys that sees the fellow open up his revolver and take the spent cartridges out and throw them on the ground, he says. So this is the answer to that one particular question about how much time had passed between the actual shots that killed the president and the shots that killed Tippit. And remember, it was because of the identification of the man going into the theater by another guy that led to the suspicion that he was fleeing from the scene of the killing of Tippit. And it wasn't specifically on the grounds of any suspicion that he was involved in killing the president that caused them to arrest him. So, anyway, so.
It's really odd that the revolver was only like loaded with 4 bullets and that he emptied it right then and there. Normally, like, I mean, not that I carry around a gun, but normally people like would load it up completely.
Well, it's more peculiar that he didn't have 6 bullets in it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and that why he would somehow, you know, because there's a
Yeah, you
plunger,
push it and
and
they all
fall on the
ejected.
ground.
Right.
That's how they do it. You don't extract them
Exactly.
one by one like this.
So he didn't have 6 bullets in there, like what was
But he had bullets in his pocket.
Yeah.
He has a whole pocket full of bullets.
Why would you only load that many?
Yeah,
Well,
it's peculiar. Wes.
Well, he could have had 6 bullets in there. He could have just decided for some reason to open the chamber afterwards and then put the live ones back in there still. There's no
Yeah.
saying that.
No, that's right.
Yeah.
But he would have pulled out 4 casings
Mm-hmm.
and
left.
thrown them on the ground
Yeah, it doesn't make that much sense.
right
but-
there, and then put 4 other ones in
Mhm.
and carry it with him.
The autopsy report on Tippit had 3 shots in his chest and 1 in his head. So, I mean, I'm looking at the autopsy report right now.
Yeah.
Verbatim.
Yeah.
So, 1 in his head, 3 in the chest. 2,
Yeah.
you
So
know.
the one grabbing his stomach, it isn't an accurate.
Well, it was, you
Yeah.
know, they were here, 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 and then in the head. That's where he got it. So that's
Yep.
right here.
Okay. So anyway, so here we are. Here we are. That the purpose of the last 2 meetings that we had in the plenary was to give you the preliminary information on the basis of which Oswald was arrested and basically charged with killing Tippit, and then the Warren Commission report that followed up on it, asserting that he had killed the president, and Tippett, both. And so we've got this scenario in front of us. And I don't want it to be a scenario that the term might be used that we just shoot at, you know, for the whole rest of the course. Because the fact of the matter is, if one were to read Buglosi's book and decide that this is the mission you have for this course, and to read the Case Closed book by Posner, that you may well come to the good faith conclusion that Oswald killed the president. And what he has done is the narrative in both of these books focuses in on Oswald, in light of the fact that the Warren Commission, the FBI, the Dallas Police, and to some extent the Select Committee on Assassination, all basically concluded that Oswald killed the president. And the only difference was that with regard to the House Select Committee on Assassinations, they determined that there was other shooters, and therefore there was a larger conspiracy. But as I say, many of the conspiracy theories exonerate Oswald. Even go so far as a couple of them to assert that he was actually trying to stop the assassination, that he was actually some type of a law enforcement / intelligence operative that was basically had infiltrated the right wing and was actually monitoring them for the FBI, and even possibly working with the Central Intelligence Agency, and that he had tried to actually warn Hosty, who was the FBI agent that was in charge of the Oswald file, about the fact that there was going to be an assassination attempt against the president. So that what we've got in front of us here is a very steep hill, if anyone wishes to climb it, to be able to get past this set of data that we're looking at here. And as Peter Dale Scott once said, he said, look at one thing after all of his time of studying this, and he's done some substantial studies on this, is that one thing is perfectly clear. Either Lee Harvey Oswald was a part of this conspiracy to kill the president for one reason or another, or he was very professionally set up to take the fall, to look as though he had done this.
I was always curious why there was not further action after the Senate Select Committee found that there was a conspiracy. I think procedurally from there it goes to the Justice Department.
The House Select Committee made an actual official recommendation and request. And we'll get to that.
Okay.
I mean, it's down the line. There's an entire focus we're going to take on the House Select Committee on Assassinations. The pacing of this is, as I've said to you before, the pacing of what I'm proposing that we do is that where did I put my little yellow pad? Here it is. That what we've done so far is just to present this theory, the lone gunman theory, and the support for it immediately the day of the assassination and the immediate hours afterwards that resulted in his being accused of it, and then the Warren Commission that basically has gone into greater depth to support that and attempt to evidence it. What we're going to do when we come together on Tuesday is we're going to be addressing what I've referred to as the readily apparent facts that have been established that were immediately obvious that challenge the Warren Commission in their conclusions. And then on Thursday, we're going to be dealing with the later disclosed information, following up on the immediately obvious facts that contradict the Warren Commission. There's a set of later verified facts that were found out later. that challenge it. And then the following week, there's, what we're gonna do is, and this is the week of October 22nd, and this is the point at which your first papers are due. That first 2 to 3 page paper, because what I want you to do is I want you to do kind of your evaluation of the lone gunman theory, you know, and all the evidence that supports it, and the evidence that was immediately obvious that seemed to run contrary to it, what the later discovered information was that was contrary to it, and you're having a chance to evaluate all of that. Because I want you to, in your first short paper, the 2 or 3 page paper, to give me your evaluation of this primal thesis, since it still stands. It's consistently referred to, ignoring the House Select Committee on Assassinations. It's still consistently referred to as the official government position. This is the official government position as to what happened. And so that what I want to do, starting on a week from this next Tuesday, is deal with the indisputable facts. Try to set forth for ourselves as we start down our move into the course after the lone gunman theory. I want to start out with trying to get up in front of us what the corpus of completely indisputable facts tell us. How much do we actually know for certain about what surrounded the assassination? And then what I'm going to do on the following Thursday, it would be on the 24th, is set forth a number of this, what I call the still controversial, but very probable facts that begin to start affirmatively suggesting that there's some other explanation for this assassination than the simple theory that Oswald, just all by himself, decided to kill the president and successfully did so. And then on Tuesday the 29th is when we start the discussion of specific alternative theories. And we start out, of course, with the House Select Committee on Assassinations, what their theory was as to who the likely participants were in the assassination conspiracy. So that's what we're doing. I'm trying to march us along in a way that gives a full opportunity for you to evaluate this lone gunman theory, take a look at it, take a look at what some of the information is that seems to be contrary to it, both the indisputable facts and the potentially controversial facts. Okay, but right now, what I want to do is I want to have us focus, since we're still in this week, about the lone gunman theory. What type of explanations would you begin to be able to think might explain the kind of evidence that was set forth by Bugliosi and the commission, the discovery of this, the metallurgical qualities of the fragments, the bullet fragments that were found in the car, and the fragments that were found in Connolly's wrist, and were found in the president's brain. I mean, why isn't it that one would be at least presumptively convinced that this had to be what they said happened?
Well, like you said, we don't know who is running those tests, and you know how much we can actually trust them. Because if you give me like some complex mathematical calculation that I could do on a calculator that will surely give you the right response, you know, I don't necessarily need to read to you exactly what's on my calculator. I could give you some other reading.
Well, they tell you who the people are that did the tests. That the fellow his name is Robert A. Fraser, who was the FBI firearms expert. and the head of the Bureau's Washington laboratory. He's the one that did the first ballistics test. And there was a second set of tests run by Joseph M. Nickel, who was the superintendent of the Bureau of Criminal Investigation for the state of Illinois. And later the spectrographic tests that were undertaken were initially undertaken by the FBI people with this peculiar and extremely new radiological test. There was a FBI Special Agent John F. Gallagher, who was a leading expert, a ballistics expert for the FBI, is the one that carried out the original investigations. The neutron activation tests. The neutron activation tests were undertaken at the Oak Ridge National Laboratory in Tennessee. And that they named the people who worked on the tests. And then they have, for the House Select Committee on Assassinations, they had a 5-member, completely different people, 5-member panel of experts. They were headed up by a Dr. Gwynn, G-U-I-N-N. And he had a PhD from Harvard University, and he performed the neutron activation tests on the Kennedy assassination evidence at his Triga Mark I nuclear reactor at the University of California at Irvine. He served as an expert witness in approximately 50 criminal trials and examined 165 different types of bullets. His research on NAA was supported by the U.S. Atomic Energy Commission and the Law Enforcement Assistance Administration, the U.S. Department of Justice. So what you start to look at here is that in order to question the integrity of these people or the competence of these people, you have to begin to question the integrity and the competence of the entire United States Justice Department. You know, and that may be easier for some than others, but there's a whole lot of people who find that difficult. Wes?
I think there may be so much skepticism about the lone gunman theory because there's like too much evidence, and people have a lot of doubt in things that, or like people get skeptical of things that seem to have all the bases covered. Like there's
Too cute by half.
Yeah, there's the bullet matching up the shells not only from Tippett's death but from Kennedy's death as well. Both of those matching up. He's carrying around the ID in his pocket. It's just like there's evidence for everything. It's just like, and I think that's why people are so skeptical of it.
That's an interesting theory. In other words, if you don't have enough evidence, they don't trust you, and if you have too much, they don't trust you either. So there's some kind of a sweet spot in there that you have to kind of hit. Michael, and then you guys, and I'll remember all your names. Michael.
Okay, so there was all this evidence, but what was his motive? What was his reason for doing the killing?
According to the commission, there's a long and very detailed account of his life and his frustrations and his having attempted to kill Edwin Walker, the right-wing kind of John Birchite general that had been forced into retirement by Kennedy. But as strange as it sounds, almost all the evidence, which even the commission itself has, is that he never said anything bad about the president at all. In fact, he seemed to like the president. Every comment that he'd ever made about Kennedy was that he liked him, that he voted for him, that he supported him. You know, yeah, that's great.
Plus the Walker, the idea that he tried to assassinate General Edwin Walker. There's only one
Witness
to that.
Marina.
That's his wife, Marina.
Yeah.
Was the only one who said that after
Yeah.
the fact.
Yeah. So it's but the thesis that has been constructed by remember to construct a thesis that has 5 or 6 specific things that are required to sustain the thesis, all you have to do is have one credible witness for each one. You know, you can have 30 people that attempt to contradict each step, but if you have a credible thesis and you have a credible person who supports each one of the steps in the thesis, you can, in a sense, go to court with that. You can win with that, because the jury's perfectly authorized to say, I don't believe these other 30 people, but I believe this one. Because the numbers don't make any difference, it's the credibility and the capabilities.
So, I believe there's so much skepticism for the lone gunman because like, for one, there's like all the destruction of evidence and then there's the evidence that.
You're making Wes's point, but then there's too much evidence.
Yeah, and then there's the evidence that they didn't want to show, like the Zapruder film. And then there's the other thing that like JFK had so many enemies that were present in Dallas. And like I heard this other thing that he was actually thinking about getting rid of Lyndon Johnson from the ticket. And that would make, you know, another enemy.
But how does that address the ballistic evidence and the spectrographic evidence?
Oh no, that was just countering the point that, you know, why people don't believe the lone gunman.
Yeah, but I assume that part of your answer would be, well, one of the reasons why people don't believe this is they don't know about it.
Oh.
This stuff, this is too particular, and they've never heard about it.
Fear change.
Yeah.
How soon after was it found out that like the car was torn apart and the limousine was like taken away and everything?
Well, they knew that right away.
So like the public knew about it, that the
No.
car was?
No,
Okay.
the
And how did
public,
if it was taken away and like taken apart and everything, where did they find the fragments? Like while they were taking it apart?
yes, they say that they found these fragments right that evening in the car.
And they were the only ones that saw the car and like, took it apart, like no one else saw it, just who took it apart?
It would be the Secret Service.
So the
immediately
Secret Service were
started.
the only ones that saw the fragments in the car and everything?
Well, they brought the car back with them on Air Force One, right? Didn't they, when Air Force One left, they carry it with them.
No, they sent it, it ended up going up to, I forget which facility up around Detroit. I got the info on here.
Uh-huh.
It was just completely reconstructed under LBJ's orders. And when asked about it, his secretary or whatever just said, well, it's so we can use the car again. Rather than getting, which was
Like,
just
took
the
another
lamest
Lincoln.
excuse.
Okay.
Is that information's in the Brothers book in chapter 1? They bring up the Bobby's going like, okay, what's in the limousine? Are we gonna search that? And was saying that it was already being gone to be fixed up for Johnson that evening.
Uh-huh. Yeah, so you begin to see Bobby right off the bat is asking questions, you know, and you know that in the Brothers, yes?
So you said that they didn't charge Oswald with the crime.
Well, they did actually eventually. They got him, they didn't in the first day. They later the next day they did. Before he was killed, before he was murdered, they had actually charged him with the death of the president, finally. But when he was first charged with the death of Tippit, and when he was being dragged around that night in front of the cameras and stuff like that, he said, look, as far as I know, I've been charged with killing a police officer.
Sure.
And that was what he was told.
Okay.
And then they charged him later, before he was
But
killed.
before that, they had the rifle, and they knew that that was the weapon that had killed him. And that was the day of the assassination.
Oh, yes, that was right that evening. They were, the chief
Of that evening,
was
okay.
carrying it around
So
like
the
this.
tests could have come in at the same time as they're making that announcement.
Well, no, what it was is since they found the Mannlicher
Mhm.
right there,
Yeah.
and the shells there,
Mhm.
they were just going on that. They were saying, okay, we got it, here's the gun.
Sure, okay, they
and
hadn't done the ballistics
They
test yet.
hadn't done any of
Okay.
that stuff yet.
All right.
Well, there was a Mannlicher Carcano that was found.
Yes.
But the initial reports that it was a German.
7.6 Mauser.
Yeah, 7.6
Six.
millimeter German Mauser, and it was even announced by the DA, and it came out of police officer's mouth, that they had found a German Mauser, 7.6 millimeter. Those were all the initial statements, and then they later changed it to the Mannlicher Carcano.
Yep.
And there was almost a statement released on a third gun, I forget the make on it. It was a British gun, it was a British assault rifle. So there were 3 guns that day that were said by official people that were used in that, but finally, the only gun that they came up with was the one that was known that someone bought under that assumed name of Oswald, whether it was Oswald or not. So it was the only frickin' gun he owned, so this is the one that.
So that, and this, yeah, the only rifle.
And he had, but, right.
Yeah, right.
And also, they didn't find his fingerprints on the gun, but then the FBI had a photo of, was it of Oswald holding a gun and then holding like a communist newspaper, but then that was later found to be fabricated.
See, you're doing some work here. Actually, there's a very famous photograph, purportedly of Oswald standing in the backyard of their previous house, taken by Marina, of him holding the Mannlicher with his pistol on his hip. And when he was, and they got a subpoena to search the garage at Ruth Payne's house after the killing that day. And they went, and they say they found the photograph in the box.
Don't the shadows not line up or something?
That's right. The people who don't believe that photograph, well, interesting, that he said immediately when he was confronted with the photograph that that wasn't him, that someone had superimposed his head on somebody else's body in a picture taken in the backyard, and that it wasn't his.
Well, and in the multiple pictures, after you analyze it digitally, you can see that it's the same head put on multiple pictures. So, which would have been ridiculous, that he would have been in that same position each time. And it's only the chin that doesn't look like Oswald's. The rest of it, that's where they started.
And the fact that the shadow under his nose
Right.
is pointing in the wrong direction from all the rest of the shadows in the backyard. So,
Is the evidence of his interrogation that night, is that able to be looked at?
non-existent.
Not
They
at all.
didn't record it, they
Actually-
didn't take notes, they said.
They took notes that
They
he
destroyed
initially-
them.
But he said, but he recovered the notes. The notes are actually on the Mary Farrell site that were taken by Captain Fritz. So,
Oh.
yeah, so
Okay.
exactly what happened is, he wrote a report of the interrogations from notes he made afterwards. Also present during the interrogations were FBI agents James Hosty, James W. Bookhout, as well as T.J. Nolte, David B. Grant, Secret Service, Robert I. Nash, United States Marshal, Billy L. Senkel, and Pam Turner of the Dallas Police Department. Captain Fritz did most of the questioning, but kept only rudimentary notes. But I've seen the notes. They've since been put on the Mary Farrell site. So you can go take a look at the notes. It's not the complete set, but there are some of his handwritten notes out there.
Mhm.
So-
And it was in those notes that Oswald, when he was confronted with the photograph, said, that's not me, they put my face on somebody else's body. Now, but interestingly, what Perglosi points out is that, look, let's stop and think about what the implications of that are. That is saying, look, it was definitely the backyard of their previous house, because it's been confirmed that it was the backyard. And the guy was wearing clothes that are identical to clothes that they recovered from Oswald's clothing. That those clothes are exactly like the clothes that he had on. And they are exactly the clothes that Marina said he was wearing when she took the photograph. And she said, that's a photograph I took of him. And there's Marina again, there's her testimony again.
Well, there's, the other thing is they know the length of the gun. They
Yes.
know how tall Oswald was. And the people in the pictures, there are 2 different heights. With respect to the length of the gun, the one guy's about 5'3" and the other one's about 5'9". So, it's even possibly 2 different dudes in those pictures.
Okay.
It's very messed up.
So here's the thing that we're dealing with, is that, see, you're in the generation that is used to the the crime lab, what are those? CSI. See, they got CSI, everywhere. CSI Florida, CSI New York, CSI Las Vegas, CSI Santa Cruz. and so that what they're doing is they're trying to give you the impression that, that this minute evidence can be investigated and is extremely reliably confirmable, and that they can get the nastiest bandit in the world ultimately to confess by proving, scientifically that they did it. But let's say that at least back at this time that wasn't true. And the reality is, even at this time, it's not true. I mean, I had a guy that I represented, his brother was murdered down on the El Toro Marine Corps Air Station, based down by San Diego. And it was perfectly obvious the guy had been murdered, but the Naval Investigative Services declared it was a suicide because he had called the Inspector General and had called in the Inspector General of the United States Marine Corps to investigate major drug smuggling going on the El Toro. And he gotten himself killed. And they just flat out said it was a suicide. It turns out his brother was a forensic pathologist. And he went through all of the data relating to it, and it was perfectly obvious that he'd been murdered. But they just absolutely refused to do anything about it. And no matter how much evidence you tried to put in front of them, they just refused to abide by it. So that it's clear that there is a quality of political contamination that invades investigations. And in this particular case, it's that type of political contamination which is primarily suspect. Because virtually all of the conspiracy theories are predicated upon the fact that you simply cannot believe the federal government when they have a political motive to falsify evidence, that they're not only perfectly capable of doing it technologically, but that they're totally disposed toward doing it politically. And that becomes the challenge here that we're going to be encountering.
So Oswald's saying that he never, as far as the picture, he's saying it's not him in the picture, and he's saying it's not his gun, because isn't there a mailing record of him ordering it through the mail?
You have to back up a second and remember the Oliver Wendell Holmes story. And that is that all we know is that that's what the police say he said.
But so he said it's not him in the picture, but did he say I don't own that gun too, or did?
All we know is what the police say he said, because they didn't tape record it, they didn't play any tape recordings. If we had the tape recordings, we could have some idea of what he said, but all we have is what they say he said.
But
and they make a big deal out of the fact that he said that he didn't own the gun. And they say, well, there's obviously proof of guilt because he's lying, because we know he owns the gun, because we've got the records of him buying the gun.
And do they have is it his handwriting in the records?
They've got all the handwriting experts say that it's his handwriting.
So I mean, it's conclusive through the mailing part of it is conclusive. There's no.
Well, that again depends on who the experts are. Who are the experts that have been called? What is their background? The reality is that most handwriting experts work for the government, and the handwriting experts are called by the government to convict people that they want to convict, ostensibly because they believe they're guilty, but they're always called to testify basically on one side, and that's the problem.
So I remember you mentioned that they found gunpowder residues on his hand,
Yes.
but not on his cheek.
That's what they say the paraffin test showed.
Who conducted those exams, and if there wasn't any on his cheek, then how did he shoot the rifle?
Yeah, well, there's two things to be said about this. Number one is that, given the fact that it was the Dallas Police Department that said that they did the paraffin tests on his face and there was no gunpowder, that has a comparatively high level of credibility, because they were working very hard to try to convince everybody that he's the one that did it. And so it's a piece of information given by them which is completely inconsistent with their own perceived interests. Okay, so it gives it a high rate of credibility. Problem is that you start looking at some of the analysis. Posner does a lot of analysis of this stuff with paraffin, and he points out that the paraffin tests are not that accurate, and that you can get both false positives and false negatives. And so what he does is he basically blows it all up, because he said even the paraffin test on his hand could have given a false positive. Because what the paraffin does is it heats up your hand and it opens up your pores, and any contaminants that you have in your skin will come out on the paraffin, and they can find it. And so that what they do most of the time is that if you analyze any particular procedure adequately, intensely, it tends to fall apart, and it isn't that reliable. That's why you get a very accomplished lawyer, you get arrested for a DUI, and you could be drunk falling out of your car, and they could end up attacking the credibility of the police officer, challenging the breathalyzer, depending on how wealthy you are, and challenging the company that made the breathalyzer, and they just keep going until everything falls apart. In this particular case, what we've got is the other side of it. We've got all their police people and nobody on the other side. Never has any of this evidence ever been subjected to a trial, so that there'd be defense counsel coming in there actually attacking and cross-examining these people, ever. And it's one of the real serious problems with this thing, which not coincidentally occurred because he was murdered, in front of everybody.
And I don't know if it was in front of the Warren Commission, but Patricia Hutton's statement, the RN nurse that was at Parkland, that was made top secret. So it might not even have been available to the Warren Commission at the time, but she was literally the first person that opened the car door, had the gurney there.
Yeah.
It was one that said the entire back of his head was blown out.
Yes.
So that was turned into a top secret document immediately.
Yeah, Greg's point being that what we've encountered a consistent pattern on the part of the executive branch, from one branch or another, whether it's the FBI, General Justice Department, ATF, any of them, the crime labs, concealing evidence, which is contrary to their thesis that he did this thing. And so that when you catch people concealing evidence, you begin to suspect that they're lying, and they're trying to conceal a lie. Wes?
Are there any people that theorize that Oswald may have had nothing to do with the assassination of Kennedy, but did in fact kill Tippit?
Mm-hmm.
And
Oh, yes.
maybe there was some other reason why he would have killed Tippit, another crime in the area that he may have been responsible for, or something like
Or some
that.
other relationship that he had with Tippit.
Yeah.
That would have caused him to be extremely defensive, encountering Tippit in that particular environment.
Yeah.
Yes, there are.
Just point out that the autopsy shows Tippit killed assassination style, 3 in the chest, 1 in the head.
Yeah.
Okay, and there are other reports you will read about Tippit's murder.
I was going to say, off of what he said, that Oswald may have killed Tippit but not Kennedy. If you assume the paraffin test is true, with a pistol, you might get the residue on your hand but not on your face.
That's right.
And so that would be consistent with that. And also you mentioned that the 2 shootings were 42 minutes apart and 4 miles away.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yeah.
So essentially he'd be running a 10-minute mile, which is not incredibly fast, but someone would have seen this man jogging pretty obviously, and
Or taking a taxi.
He took a bus.
Oh, there's a bus. There's a bus involved. There's a
okay,
bus
so not on
involved.
foot. Okay.
Well, there's a bus involved, and then they report that he got off the bus ahead of time, and it's not clear why he got off the bus ahead of time, because there's too much traffic. There's an entire cottage industry around reconstructing the alleged journey of Oswald, from the book depository to being in custody in the movie theater. And there are probably a dozen different reconstructions of that.
I'm not bringing up anything that is not from right then. Okay?
Yeah.
But, JFK's brain was lost. Okay, so no more bullet fragments, nothing to be found because it was lost. The crime scene limousine was destroyed, basically. They just tore that apart, completely done. Governor Connolly's suit coat, which would have shown the difference between exit wounds and entry wounds was sent up immediately to the dry cleaners to be cleaned and returned to them for after that's cleaned. So it was sanitized. And you'll have to read more about the Zapruder film to discuss that, but,
Right.
you know.
Yeah, no, there are a long list of
Right.
issues.
They didn't send the pants out, but.
Right. No, there's a long list of issues that arise here. But what I'm trying to do here again today, in the time that we still have, so what do we go from 6 to 7:10? Okay, so we got 20 minutes left. Okay, so what I'm saying is that I want you to genuinely appreciate the strength of the potential case against Oswald. You know, because it isn't going to do you any good to come through a course like this and still fall prey to the same kind of flaccid thinking that goes on the part of a lot of people who couldn't pass a test on the assassination, and yet are just fervently committed to the fact that whatever the theory is they have, the CIA did it, or that Hoover did it, or whoever they don't happen to like. And so what you have to do as scholars, you've got to be able to separate yourself out from the kind of whining and slack thinking that goes on that may well support the same position you take as a scholar. But you've got to be able to undertake a really professional and competent line of analysis and argumentation to support the position that you come to.
In our final paper, do we have to address what we think is wrong with the case that we put forward against Oswald, or do we just go ahead with whatever we believe?
No, I think, well, my opinion is that by the time we only get to the 22nd, you're not really going to have seen a lot of information about the other conspiracy theories.
I mean, like the final paper?
Oh, the final paper.
Yes.
Oh, the final paper, I want you to tell me what you believe happened.
But do we acknowledge, like, the evidence they put that Oswald did it, or?
No, well, what you have to do is that if in fact, whatever position you take, you need to set forth the information and evidence that supports what you say, and then you've got to account for information that would be contrary, that would be completely inconsistent with what you're saying. And if you haven't taken into account and explained in some way how you can possibly negate that information, it's going to be trouble for you. And so I just want you to tell me what you've concluded happened, and be as detailed as you can about what supports it and how you deal with what contradicts it.
So in that final paper, just say if the theory that we thought it was that, like, the mafia put Lee Harvey Oswald up to it, then you would use a lot of evidence from the lone gunman, but not necessarily stating that it was only him.
That's right.
But that and, anything from the mafia, you can just kind of pull it all in.
That's exactly right.
Okay.
That's exactly how you do it. Yeah, yeah.
Wouldn't Hoover saying or telling the FBI or the Warren Commission to find Oswald, the lone gunman, wouldn't that just nullify the entire investigation?
Well, not necessarily, not necessarily. For example, you know perfectly well that if a person has been arrested and is going to be prosecuted for a particular crime, the district attorney assigns an assistant district attorney to prosecute the person to get them convicted. And that doesn't necessarily destroy their entire case. It just suggests that the person is got a particular objective they're trying to achieve, and they may have overlooked or not adequately evaluated certain contrary evidence, or that they may have been over gullible in believing a certain witness that supports what they're saying. And so that what you want to do as the defense counsel in that particular case, you can't just say to the jury, say, well, this district attorney, he's just here to convict this guy, whether he's innocent or not. Because you'd be able to say that in every single case. That's what they're there for. I mean, they're professionally hired to convict the people that have been indicted. That's what they're there for. And no matter how many times they say, well, their real obligation is to determine what's true, that's my obligation as the district attorney, that's all crap, you know? So the fact that Hoover said, you know, I want you to establish that this guy did it, and I want it done, you know, fast, is reason to suspect or to be suspicious of the objectivity of the investigation. That's true.
Yeah.
But it isn't a dead bang winner. I mean, it doesn't just win your argument. They say, oh, look, he told them to go and prove it.
Yeah, because that makes me wonder what evidence was not shown.
Yes. Oh, yeah, and that's what you look for.
Yeah.
That's
Plus-
exactly what you look for.
Plus, Alan Dulles being on the commission.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
There's another one. Now, there's a number of folks who haven't spoken at all here, though. You're just kind of quietly hanging out there. And I mean, you must be thinking about some of this stuff. You must have some questions, and this is the kind of opportunity you have if you're starting to think about, as several of you have indicated, thinking about the paper, the ultimate paper of where you're going, and trying to figure out, you know, since we're kind of, in a sense, coming to the close of our discussion of the lone gunman theory as an affirmative thesis. And you may be thinking about, well, you know, I'm persuaded by this. I'm willing to stand up against everybody else and take the position that he did do it. You know, this is the time to ask your questions. You know, or if you're going to have to deal with this information, you want to start doing it now. Yes, Mallory. I mean.
Yeah. What was the relationship between Marina and Lee Harvey Oswald? Because she went on the stand and like basically said, yep, my husband's guilty, he definitely did all these things. It seems like if she was more devoted to him, more like wanted to, you know, have his back a little bit, she wouldn't have been so willing to say, yes, absolutely, he's the one that did it, and here's all the reasons why.
Well, you're asking the lady questions, just like with Jackie. Didn't Jackie say that, oh, look what they did to the president?
Right.
It's a very major issue with Marina, is that it was quite clear that, well, there are some people who very simply say, you know, obviously Marina and he were separated, they obviously weren't getting along at all, it's almost certain that she was going to get a divorce from him anyhow, and therefore she's not trustworthy, she wasn't guarding his back. She went quite, there's so many different types of positions she's taken on so many different things. And you know, she's here in a foreign country, speaking a foreign language. She doesn't have any of her family here, you know, so that one could argue that whoever it is that's asking the questions, it's going to be likely that she's going to tell them whatever it is she thinks they want to hear. You know, and so that it isn't necessarily dispositive. And you could have three different groups of people asking her questions and her giving completely different answers. And when you start to discover that all the answers she's giving are completely consistent with what the questioner wants her to say, even if they're completely different from each other, that begins to cause you to get an idea of what's going on with her.
Well, it also like kind of makes me wonder, you know, is she trying to clear her own name? Because, you know, she was married to him. It seems reasonable that people would ask the question of like, were you involved? Did you help him in any way? And like, if she's just saying what they want to hear, that kind of leads me to believe that she's just kind of
Exonerating
saying,
herself.
I'm not responsible. Exactly.
Yeah. Well, again, the fact that she was as young as she was, and that she was here in a very kind of defenseless position. You know, here she is now with two babies, you know, in a country where she can just barely speak the language, and her husband has been arrested and then murdered for killing the President of the United States. There's not a lot of advantage she's going to have to try to fight about this, you know, and put up a big fight and defend him and be the one taking on the entire government. So there's lots of different analyses.
But since they were married, didn't she not have to give any testimony whatsoever? Like, couldn't she, Isn't there like the law, like where you're married, you don't have to testify?
I'm almost certain that no one advised her of that.
I
At
was
the
gonna
time.
say, she didn't have to say anything at all, really.
Yeah. No, and then she probably would have been put in jail, because that's how the cops respond to that kind of stuff. is
Or
that-
deported.
Pardon?
Or
Yeah, or
deported
deported,
back to
bang,
Russia. That
out
was
she goes.
entirely
You know, because the minute that you, I mean, unless one throws oneself on the ground and exposes one's stomach and vulnerability like a poor little puppy dog to the cops, you know, I mean, they all start lathering at the mouth and thinking you're guilty. You know, I mean, and she probably was aware of that. So that's, I'm sure no one advised her that she didn't have to speak. In fact, the first person that, Dick Billings, who's writing the book with me on this thing, he flew directly from Miami to Dallas right that afternoon, and got in later that day. An associate of his from Chicago, from Life magazine, had arrived earlier, had Marina with him in a hotel. Well, all the police and everybody were looking for her. You know, they were running around trying to figure out where she was, but he had gotten to her, had brought her to the hotel, and had her squirreled away from everybody else. But they didn't get her a lawyer, because Life magazine was trying to get her story, get her to talk to them. And so she was talking to them already. So it's, no one was giving her a lawyer and advising her as to what to say, or how to protect herself. That's true.
Why was Oswald so obsessed with like the Soviet Union and like getting citizenship there?
Well, that's an interesting question, and there are a number of theories about it. The Warren Commission theory, which we're dealing with this week, is that he in fact had a very troubled youth, was a troubled child. His mother had put him into an orphanage, he and his brother into an orphanage, had basically abandoned him. He'd gotten into trouble when he was young. He had threatened his sister-in-law or someone with a knife, was sent to a juvenile detention, had gone into the Marines when he was only 17 years old, had never gotten along inside the Marines, they all made fun of him, and then he started studying Marxism. In a sense, what their theory is kind of projected his rejection out onto everybody, and started thinking in terms of how unjust the American culture was as a whole, and then began to figure out that it was a systemic source of this problem, which was capitalism. And then he became a Marxist, and he was reading Marxist literature, and he applied for the militant and studied Russian language, and that he developed a mania, basically, about this. And that's why he went to the Soviet Union, and then when he got to the Soviet Union, his general anti-authoritarian disposition began to manifest vis-a-vis them, and what horses' asses they were, and how they were authoritarian, and how they were awful, and all this romantic idea that he had about the Soviet Union was shown not to be true, you know, and so after a couple of years of being there and being married and having a little baby, and he wanted to get out of there. And so he turned around and came home. And as soon as he got back home, rather than going, am I glad to get back here, compared to that, he started worrying again about how awful things were here. And that he was disconnected, mentally disheveled, didn't know what he was doing, wanted to be important, wanted to have people think he was a person who could affect history. And the typical classic lone gunman kind of scenario went down from there on. So that's their whole thesis. And they have, as you can see in Bugliosi's book, they have assembled a substantial quantum of information and evidence and statements and testimony of people supporting that theory. This is not an unsubstantiated thesis that independent of the ballistics evidence and the radionics evidence here. There's information abounding to support the fact that he's a little strange.
He volunteered to go into the Marines at a young age.
There's one right there.
He went into the
There's-
Marines.
Oh, I'm sorry, that was,
He was at Atsugi base, he had a
Yeah.
high security clearance,
Yeah.
very high security clearance. And so here's a guy with a high security clearance that knew about U-2 spy missions and all the rest of it, and they let him go to the Soviet Union without a blink, and they let him back in this country. He just picked up his visa, dropped it off at one embassy, picked it up at the other. That happens a lot.
This is the consistent questioning perspective that you hear coming from. But what I'm saying is that that's their theory as to what the motive was.
It seems to me that the government took like a really big gamble with the Warren Commission because on the one hand, with appointing such men of high profile, you get this automatic notion that you should believe them because you've appointed them to such high positions that they have to be good men or else what, you know?
Yeah,
and
exactly. What does that mean?
And if you can prove in fact that there was a conspiracy, then that means that there's like corruption to the highest degree in the government. You know?
Yes.
So
That's right. I mean, that's the problem. That's the danger here.
Yeah.
Let me try to get some of the folks again who haven't spoken much. Lulu, what do you think? I remember you were talking about stuff last week. What do you think about this lone gunman theory so far?
Like, as you said, like, I was surprised, like, 83% of witnesses believe there were, like, 3 shots, you said? And there's 70, I think you said 75 of them believe the shots came from the book depository. I don't know, like, everything's so, like, overwhelming when you think about it, because, like, I don't know, I mean, I want to, like, all the evidence makes sense that Lee Harvey Oswald was, like, the only one that would, you know, kill him, but it just seems unlikely that there's only one person that would be involved at the same time. I don't know.
So that's where you are right now so far.
I'm just kind of
Okay.
reading all the information.
All right. So I see you looking at your digital there. So so you're checking data for us here?
I mean, well, I feel like this topic is pretty new to me, and I know that like there's a lot of evidence on the lone gunman theory, but I mean, like you said, some of it could be fabricated or it's like really controversial. So I mean, when I think about like writing my final thesis, I think I would have to research more on like other alternate theories, and when you go into depth more about it, like in the further weeks.
All right. So how far have you gotten into your reading so far?
Well, the last reading I did was the one about the different types. The lecture that you did last week, it was an online article. I can't recall what it's called, but
Right.
it was about like how there are different approaches and the inductive and deductive. Yeah, and I thought that was really interesting about how you can take those different approaches and apply them to determining what possible take I might have on this.
Right.
Yeah.
How do you generally go about things? Do you generally have a pretty rapid conclusion about things and then justify it, or are you kind of slow?
I'm actually a psych major, so like, I mean, psychology kind of teaches me to like, I guess, just explore all the different possibilities and how, like, I actually just took a research methods class in the summer, and it was really interesting about how like, we just conducted different experiments, how to like test a hypothesis, and that is something that I think I could apply when writing my final paper. Yeah.
All right. And then now, in your work in the field of psychology, do you tend to feel more comfortable with generating a hypothesis and then testing it to try to negate it, or are you more inclined to try to kind of work through gathering more and more data and pieces of data until something starts to assemble itself?
I mean,
How you
sometimes we
doing?
might be really like, in psychology, like we learned that sometimes you might be really sure about your hypothesis, but as you actually conduct your experiment and you go out and do research, you might find that you're completely wrong, and you might find that your hypothesis was proven wrong.
So there's a tendency to falsification,
Mhm.
looking to falsify a particular
Yeah.
thesis, so that you might feel more comfortable. For example, even as we're discussing the lone gunman theory, you're impressed by things that falsify it, that try to run contrary to it, like pieces of information like Greg is pointing out, that cause you to be concerned about believing it. And that that might be a thing that you do with each thesis that comes out. Is look at you're concentrating on things that falsify it. Okay, so I would just suggest that you have to try to figure out, in addition to that, whether you can figure out something affirmative about what you think happened here.
Right.
Because that's what we're going to be going after. Because I mean, it's conceivable you get all the way to the end of the thing and you say, you know, I've got reasons to disbelieve every single one of these theses, and not have any thesis as to what happened at all. So just be guarded about that. Be trying to kind of figure out some pieces, some positive pieces that go into figuring out what's going on. Okay, so.
I actually did have a question that I wrote down when you're during the lecture. Why did it matter so much for Hoover and the FBI to prove that Oswald did kill JFK? Like, why was it so important to pin the blame on someone else within a week after JFK was killed? When, you know, I don't know. It's just...
Yeah. Well, there's again, there are some potentially more or less innocent explanations for it, and some less innocent explanations for it. That for example, law enforcement people, like Hoover was, always have a tendency, or have a tendency for the most part, of fastening on to someone who they have kind of a preliminary sense may have done it, and there's any kind of reasons they have for believing they've done it at all. And once they bite onto the person, all they do is just try to keep on going after them. And prove one more thing after another, and they start ignoring all kinds of, and you see it all the time. I mean, it's a major law enforcement problem. You know, that the people that are higher up in the ranks tend to do the same thing. They say, look, okay, we got our guy. Let's get this case off the books. Let's get this closed down. Let's get everybody satisfied that we're on top of this thing and we've done our job efficiently and effectively. Okay, so that's that one. You know, and on the other end of the spectrum, there's the one, you know, if someone gives an order to their people to prove a particular person did it, you would believe that they have some reason to try to cover up what really happened. Okay, so that you know, these are some of the pieces of evidence and data that have innocent or not so innocent interpretations, and you have to start trying to figure out which one you think is true. Like, what do you know? You can find out a bunch of stuff about Hoover and what he was like, and you know, to have a professed Marxist in your crosshairs of killing the President of the United States is a dream for a guy like Hoover. You know, if he can lock that one down, then his whole historical worldview has been proven to be true. The commies are everywhere.
Even though they might think that it would be better to just like get it figured out so that all America can go to bed at night knowing that they know who killed the president, wouldn't they stop and think that it's more risky to just attach to this one person and blame him within like the first night of catching him, when evidence could surface later that would prove them wrong and make them look much worse for not knowing who killed the president the whole time?
Yes, one of the very special, one of the very special qualities that you have to keep in mind, or one of the special factors you have to keep in mind in this case, is that they're all in charge. So, you know, when you talk about other evidence coming forward later to disprove their simple-minded theory, you know, like, who's going to do that? I mean, you know, they're the ones with all the guns, they're the ones with all the law enforcement ability, they're the ones with all the investigative capacity, you know, so that, I'm trying to remember what someone said it the other day. Oh, when that when the head of the Central Intelligence Agency was questioned by the United States Senate and said, or the NSA rather, the NSA said, are you people doing surveillance on American telephone conversations? And he said, no, absolutely not. And then they found out later that it was absolutely true because of Snowden. Edward Snowden revealed it, and Glenn Greenwald printed it in the newspapers. And so then they go back and they confront the guy and they say, wait a second, we just asked you that question a month ago and you said no, they weren't doing it. And he said, well, that was the best I could do. That's what he said. And so someone came up to me and said, well, wait a second, he can't do that. Isn't that perjury? And he said, how come he doesn't get prosecuted? That's the question you're asking. Why doesn't he get prosecuted? Well, because they're in charge. He's part of the same executive department that makes decisions about who's going to get prosecuted. And so he's doing things that are in service to the executive branch, and so therefore they certainly aren't going to prosecute him. Not only because they don't want to punish him, because he did just exactly what they wanted him to do, but they don't want to deter anybody else from lying when they get caught. And so that's the thing with Hoover and these guys. These guys were seriously in charge. J. Edgar Hoover was seriously in charge. He was on top of the entire law enforcement system in the country. And that if he could get local police departments and local sheriff's departments and state VCIs and others all in line with him so that they were all subject to his command, he would have been even happier. And so that I can assure you that they were thinking about how risky is it for us to come out with this simple-minded theory and try to get everybody convinced of it. But they were pretty confident they were able to shut down any alternative sources of information. And that's one of the things you're going to find in the additional work that we're doing, how many times evidence was destroyed and witnesses were suppressed and intimidated. Okay, Seth, and then, I'm sorry. So let me go out to me. Yes, because you had a question before, Seth. You were trying to get 2 or 3 times. Okay, we're done. All right, Seth.
I was just going to say that even if Hoover had like a reigning power over police forces across the country, like wouldn't eventually, if something as like say a cover-up of certain procedural things, wouldn't somebody eventually, like even after Hoover died, after it was like all done, wouldn't someone say something? Like I can't imagine thousands of people being like suppressed and told not to talk at one point and just keeping with it.
What you're saying, if I may say so, you're saying, wouldn't somebody have talked? That's a great book. One of the better books around, Larry Hancock's book, Someone Would Have Talked. What the fact is, someone did talk. A lot of someone's talked all over the place.
Well, the only thing I want to finish with is the Warren Commission we're talking about, right? So, 3 Warren Commission quotes from Senator John Hoover, Warren Commission. I heard Governor Connolly testify very strongly that he was not struck by the same bullet, and I could not convince myself that the same bullet struck both of them. Senator Richard D. Russell, Warren Commission member. I do not share the finding of the commission as to the probability that both President Kennedy and Governor Connolly were struck by the same bullet. Bert Griffin, assistant counsel to the Warren Commission. I feel betrayed. I feel that the CIA lied to us. The CIA concealed from us the fact that they knew they were involved in efforts to assassinate Fidel Castro, which could have been of extreme importance to us. And finally, Alan W. Dulles, Warren Commission member, that little Kennedy, he thought he was a god.
Yeah.
That comes directly from him.
Okay, kids? So I'll see you Tuesday.